And now, back from parts unknown, Flick and the Bozman show, introducing from Furman University at a height of 6'6", the Bozman, Dave Ingray.
And out of Briarcliff Middle School, weighing in at 6'7". He's tone deaf. He's colorblind. He's the Flickster. It's Flick. Back from their extended tour of Europe, Scandinavia, and the African subcontinent. It's the Flick and the Bozman show.
Where have we been since 2002? I guess was our last show.
I can only imagine.
Well, we did shows after 9/11
Yeah.
for sure. Not long after that. So where'd we go? What happened? What happened to the show?
I think we had families and
Ah,
jobs and stuff.
we had life.
We
Life
had life.
happened.
Yeah, we stopped being quite so geeky for at least for a little while.
I don't know if that's it. I don't know if
Nah.
I became any less geeky. I may have become more geeky, but
It depends who you ask, I guess.
maybe less free time to do this show.
Yeah,
Maybe we thought there was no future in podcasts.
that may have been part of it.
That may have been a misjudgment.
We were ahead of our time. Or
An error. Yeah, that's something. That's something. We were definitely ahead of our time, and like I said, one of our last shows, I guess, was after 9/11, and about the closest thing to that since, or at least I've had as much time since then, is this pandemic and coronavirus, and leaves me with a lot of time and opportunity to be geeky, and I said, why not do one of these? Even if we're the only two people listening, why not do it?
absolutely, and similarly, although this is going to apparently drag on much longer as far as its impact on sports. Uh, there was about a week and a half or 2 weeks after 9/11 when nothing happened in the country, and even less is happening now, and of course more people are dying, and it's a terrible thing in many ways for many people. But sometimes I think people need a distraction. You need to take a step back and just find something that's fun and brainless. And what better way than to do our own? We missed out on March Madness this year. We missed out on the NBA playoffs. We're missing out on the baseball season starting up. So I think it was your idea, right, Flick, to copy a deal they're doing on WFAN and do a tournament of pain here, right?
Yeah, they're doing that on Joe and Evan's show. So I'll say right off the bat, clearly copying their idea here. We are going to do the positives of this if we do a second show in this return engagement. But what they're doing is Joe is a lifelong fan of the Jets, which I am as well. The Mets, I am as well. He's also a fan of the Knicks and the Rangers. So I don't have that going. But lots of people online have been doing various brackets and 64 songs or 64 movies. So what they've been doing is the 64 most painful sporting events in Joe's life. And I said, wow, a lot of them would be on my list. So I said, why not make my list? So originally we had come up with 64 painful moments, a lot of the same as Joe's because of the overlap between the Jets and the Mets. I also had a lot of Devils events on there, and I couldn't put this together myself. So the Boz did a lot of the work with the Mets and ranking their pains, and then my buddy Eric Martin ranked the Jets' pains and came up with a few others. So we finally had a field of 64, and throughout this, we may address some of those that aren't here in the final. We're down to 8, if I'm correct, right?
Yes, sir.
We're down to 8, and somehow they're all Jets and Mets. The
As it should be. As I think you've been a big Devils fan over the years, but not so much with the NBA, not so much with any of the college sports. And so I think as much heart as you put into those two teams in particular, I'm not at all surprised. There was a couple. There was a couple of moments I thought that those Devils losses in '94, one of those would sneak into the final eight, the Elite Eight. Can we call this the Elite Eight?
I guess we can. Yeah, the
Uh,
pitiful eight, something like that.
yeah, yeah. Um,
So,
they got
what are they if you want to run them down? Because I'm trying to be as, even though I'm selecting the winners of all these matchups, just like Joe is doing in the WFAN one. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. There's no stakes, so what the heck? But I'm trying to be honest and pick the winners, the ones that caused me the most grief.
So let me. Why don't I give the folks listening at home,
Yeah.
wherever they may be, a brief overview of how the brackets were divided up. I sort of hit upon the notion. Flick asked me to see the different events, and I realized that some of them were more long-term effect type things, and some of them were single moments, and then I realized some of them were single games, and so I divided them into four loosely but pretty strongly, maybe loosely, you can decide for yourself, into four different brackets, the first being 16 single moments. And
So that could be a play in a game or
one
a
play
single game or trade, something like that.
one play in a game, generally speaking. Uh, there was, I think there's one, or maybe there's one exception in this as I'm looking at it, when the Giants, I put in one about my football Giants blowing an 11-point lead in the last whatever 2.5 minutes to Denny Green's Vikings due to their extra clock management. I don't think that made it out of the first round, but that was the only exception to the single moment as I'm looking at them. Um, then there was a single game, such as the number one seed in that bracket was the Devils losing Game 7 to the Rangers in '94. The number two seed and still alive is the Jets' double overtime loss to Cleveland in '86, and we'll go from there.
Oof.
Then there was the series or most of a season bracket that was led by the 2000 World Series Mets losing to the Yankees. Not a particularly shocking. I'll let you speak to this a bit, but not a particularly shocking result that the Mets lost that, but still sucks to lose to the Yankees. The number two seed in that is the Mets losing in 2015 to a middling Royals team
Oof.
on what looked like a magical run that the Mets were on from the beginning, from the middle of that season. Remember, with the great trade for Cespedes, and now Murphy went on a tear, and Wilmer Flores crying in the dugout, and all that great stuff. That was an amazing season, and for it to end that way.
Yes, it was.
And then the fourth bracket is what we loosely refer to as years of pain. Still alive, the number one seed, Mo Lewis knocking out Drew Bledsoe to start the Tom Brady era. An early surprise knockout, trading Tom Seaver, the Mets trading Mr. Franchise, and we'll go from there. So that was how the different events were. I don't want to go through all 64, but those were what they were divided up into. So for the single moments, the two remaining seeds are Mike Scioscia's Game 3
Oh,
game winning or go ahead home run off of Dwight Gooden in the ninth inning in a game Gooden was dominating in '88, and that swung the series. And we'll go into that in a little bit.
oh yeah.
And that's playing in its Elite Eight matchup against the 1999 Braves versus Mets.
Oh,
Collapse collapse is definitely the wrong word. The near comeback
the near comeback.
that we
Yes.
were both sure that if the Mets had won Game 6, they were going to win Game 7 and go on to win the World Series that year against what was probably a really good Yankees team, to be honest with you. But Kenny Rogers walking in,
Oh.
walk off run in that game. So that
This recording's working. Yes, that's me grunting and groaning in the
yeah,
background as I hear these
epic,
moments.
epic. Uh, in the season, that is going up against two other Mets, or the winner of that series will go up against one of these two matchups, which is the Mets' epic collapse in '07, which was off the heels of losing Game 7 in 2006 when Beltran, which was, I think, a number one seed here elsewhere in the single moment. Oh, no, sorry, it was a number two seed in the single moment. when Beltran was caught looking to end that series in Game 7, which also is going to be featured, I think, if we do the miracle thing when Andy Chavez had that amazing catch.
Oh,
And
the
I thought for
great
sure they were going to win that game when he made that catch and go on to the World Series. And again, the Cardinals were not a good team that year. Mets lose to that team. They come back the next year. They're just as good. They're up 7 games with 17 to play and lose and don't make the playoffs, losing 2 out of 3 to the Marlins, the last place Marlins to end the season, and go home for the year.
You want me to handle the Met side of the bracket now, or
Yeah,
not that it was even a Met side of the bracket? It just so
just
happens that
happened that
the
way.
Met event got there.
That
Yeah,
team beat out the Favre Jets team collapse, which in my mind was due to
6-1.
Favre being old and just battered around by the end of the season and losing his fastball there. But the 07 Mets are going up against the 2015 World Series loss, and I can go into that and exactly what happened there. But basically, in a nutshell, I always blame the 2015 World Series on the relief pitcher whose name I'm drawing a blank on. That couldn't not familiar. I just had it a few minutes ago. I'll think of it anyway.
Not K-Rod. Who are you?
No, the 8th inning guy that they traded for in the middle of the season. I'll get it.
There's so many possibilities.
Yeah. But
I blame it on. Didn't that series start with inside the park home run, or was it ruled a triple and an error?
It was an epic start. But that was Tyler Clippard was the guy.
Oh yes, okay, yes.
Couldn't get an out. Couldn't get the 8th inning done, and
how could I forget?
Forced Terry Collins to go to Familia in the 8th inning multiple times, right. And we all knew that Collins was a 1-inning pitcher. And
Familia was. Collins was.
Yeah, thank you. Collins was definitely not a 1-inning pitcher.
He couldn't have done much worse in some of those.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the 2 matchups. So why don't we go back to the top of the brackets, the single.
Okay.
The Socha game, if you recall, they were.
Oh, I recall.
They were up 2 games.
Gooden probably shouldn't have been in the game any longer, but
that would have.
Of course, if you take him out and you bring in relief and the relief blows it, why didn't you leave Dwight in? So I understand that, but I just remember it cleared the fence rather easily, but he almost just stuck his bat on it.
Yeah.
Gooden had walked a guy or somebody got a single, and there was a guy on first, and he was messing with trying to keep him near first, and
that was up. The Mets were up 4-2 in the 9th, and to your point, I mean, the Mets had Randall Myers and Roger McDowell in the bullpen, 2 all-time great Mets relievers, or at least all-time great relievers. Myers went on to achieve greatness elsewhere.
Yeah,
but was one of the dominant relievers in baseball for many years after that, after leaving the Mets. I mean, he was great with the Mets, but they didn't use him the way the Reds and other teams did. So yeah, they definitely could have gone to the bullpen there, and winning that game would have put the Mets up 3-1, and they would have gone on to the World Series and Nash Brothers.
Even losing that game, I thought they'd go on to the World Series, which may affect if this advances or not. I'm not sure
yet. So the Dodgers got Game 5. Cone pitched brilliantly in Game 6, and then Hershiser just shut out the Mets in Game 7 and beat Darling 6-0.
They beat and that game was over early, right?
Yeah.
Like the Mets gave up 4 or 5 runs in the first.
Yep. So they had a chance in Game 7. I mean, they had a chance going into Game 7, but they never had a chance once Game 7 got rolling. And interestingly, Hershiser came back to be a bit player in the matchup he's going up against. He was on the Mets side in '99 and actually pitched in that deciding Game 6 and stood to be the winning pitcher, actually, if the Mets could have held the lead.
If I was having you vote, I'm a one-man committee on this, but if although Dave shot down one of my edits when I tried to change a matchup, he said no, that was not allowed. So I wasn't in charge, but I was in charge of picking the winners of pain. That Dodger team ended up winning the World Series over the terrific Oakland team, if I'm correct, and that was That was the Kirk
Gibson, yeah.
Gibson
I can't believe
moment.
what I just
And
saw.
I just never thought that Dodger team was any good. I thought Oakland would beat them easily in the World Series. I thought the Mets might sweep them. So as they lost games here and there, still even going into Game 7, I'm like, the Mets have
Oh,
this. I know
yeah.
it's in LA, but this team's not any
It was
good.
the same. It
And
was basically the same team that had dominated in '86, even though they struggled to win the World Series in 7 games against the Red Sox that year. That was what, a 106 win team or something, and then they had one of the moments of pain was the Pendleton home run in '87 that sort of knocked the Mets out of contention that year. Um, that lost early, lost in the second round to the Louis Castillo dropped pop up against the Yankees in one of the first interleague games. Not one of the first, but you remember a key inter.
and that's something a little bit surprising that I had to consider in some of these is what happened the year before, what happened the year
Yeah,
after, what were my expectations, and my expectations were they're going to win this series against the Dodgers, no problem. My expectations weren't necessarily at the start of the series that they were going to beat the Braves, but then they started coming back, and even in that game, the Kenny Rogers game, they were way down, came back, took the lead, and
yeah,
it just looked like they were going to win Game 6, and the pitching matchup looked good in Game 7, and momentum and all that, and it ended up not working out. But you talk about expectations, and yeah, they let things get away from them in '87, but boy, in '88, they were the best team in baseball, them in
yeah,
Oakland, and boy,
yep.
so for the moment, and even if I said that whole series, I think that's got to advance.
Was that the Socha? Yeah,
Yeah,
that, that
I think.
that's what I would have thought. To be honest with you, the Braves, as you said, the Braves series, they were the better team. They were dominant for more than a decade. They won the first 3 games of the series. They started out 5-0. I don't think Leiter got an out in the first inning as the starting pitcher. And then, interesting footnote: Pat Mahomes, the father, of course, of the reigning Super Bowl MVP, Pat Mahomes, pitched 4 innings and gave up 1 hit and kept the Mets in the game. And then Piazza hits the tying home run in the 7th. They take the lead in the 8th. It was such a fun ride. You just knew. I knew if they were going to win that game, if they could have held on, they would have won the series.
I sure think so. I agree
They
with you
did
there.
come back again. Speaking of what happened next, they did come back and get to the World Series the next year. Um, so they
But they weren't as good. They weren't
no,
as
they
good.
weren't.
The World Series team wasn't as good as the team that didn't get there.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny how that works. Absolutely. So definitely agree with you on that one. In the bottom half of the bracket, it's the '07 collapse, and I alluded to it before. They're up 7 games. They took 2 out of 3. The second out of 3 games against Atlanta on September 12th in '07 to go up 7 with 17 to play. They get swept by the Phillies in between. Uh, who's it? The Braves, I guess. Who won in '07? I forget. Um, who won the division?
Wasn't it the
Yeah,
Phillies?
oh, it was the Phillies. That's right. That was their World Series run.
Yeah,
Um,
beating the Yanks.
yeah, with Howard and Rollins and Utley and those guys. Uh,
Or they beat the Yanks, or the Yanks beat them. They were back to back
yeah, yeah.
years.
Uh, so they had a game. They won a game on the Mets off day to make it 6.5. They lose to the Phillies 3 straight to go 3.5 with 14 to play. Then they had a walk off loss to start a 4 game series to the Marlins. I had blocked out this pitcher from my memory as a Met reliever. Jorge Sosa
Oh no, he was.
got the
Yeah,
loss
I
to go to 9-8 on the season. They won their next 3 games behind Pedro, Oliver Perez, and one of my least favorite unnecessary trades in Mets history. They traded Joe Smith for nobody for a relief pitcher from the Marlins that ended up stinking. And Joe Smith, I think, is still pitching, 13 years later, um, and still a pretty good relief pitcher. So they were still up 2.5 with 7 to play. Then they're swept by the Nationals to be up 1 with 4 to play. Then they had to play this makeup game against St. Louis, which would have otherwise been an off day. And Pedro lost 3-0 to Joel Pinheiro. Joel Pinheiro, a name I have not said out loud in at least 13 years. Pitched 8 innings and gave up 3 hits and no runs, and they lost that game. And then they lose game 1 to the Marlins. They win the second game 13-0. And then Glavine gets 1/3 of an inning in the last game of the regular season and gives up 5 hits and 7 earned runs.
Now that second to last game that they won easily, who started that for the Mets?
The one that they won easily?
Yeah,
I'll have to get that one for you. I will grab that for you momentarily. 07. That was one you're watching it and you go, man, I don't like. They're going to need some of these runs the next day.
Right. Save a few. Yeah, I know it's not logical, but
yep, it does. Yeah, it does. Obviously, it doesn't work that way. Where was that? Results and schedules.
Because what?
So it's John Maine.
Maine, and even I was thinking, even at midway through that game, bring him back and not to start the game, but if something happened. But of course, I thought they'd win the last game, and that's just all those things you're saying are.
John Maine pitched 7 2/3 innings, gave up 1 hit, 2 walks, and struck out 14.
I guess you leave him in there. There was another year I remember they pitched Johan near the end of the season, second to last game, and I thought they could have pulled him earlier, and maybe I'm making things up, but yeah, boy.
Yep.
Yeah, that 7 with 17, it just didn't make any sense, and people were saying, "Oh, they might blow this." I said, "Oh, you're crazy. They can't blow it."
And part of that too, thinking about what happened the next year, they blew it again.
Yeah. Now, 08, they were never up that much with that few to go, but yeah, they blew it again, and this was all Randolph was managing at this time,
yeah,
right?
And then the Midnight Massacre, right? And they jacked him on the way out to Oakland or something that year.
And what's this going against? I've tried to block so many things.
It's going up against the 15 World Series. So to walk
against the Royals. Okay.
So game 1.
I got to take the 07 collapse.
All right. Let me just go through real quick. Game 1, Tyler Clippard comes in and blows the lead in the 8th. Forces Familia. He walked a couple guys and forced Familia to come into the 8th. Familia blows the save in the 9th.
With the stupid quick
pitch, exactly right. DeGrom pitched terribly in game 2 for him anyway. 5 innings and 4 runs, and they lose 7-1. Noah pitched great in game 3. Clippard again blows it in game 4. And then there's the famous Matt Harvey thing in game 5 when they're up 2-0 in the 9th. Harvey walks Lorenzo Cain to lead off the 9th. Cain steals second. Hosmer doubles him in. A ground out from Familia gets Hosmer to third, and then Wright looks the runner back, throws from third to first, but Dude is late with the throw and wide with the throw home and ties the game, and then Addison Reed gives up 5 runs in the 12th, and they lose it. Yeah. So, but that was game. Each of those games, except for game 3, except for DeGrom's game in game 2, each of those games that the Mets lost, they probably could have won.
They were also a wild card, right? They were the wild card, and or weren't expected to be there, and they'll be back, and they got all this young pitching, and Harvey's great, DeGrom's great, and Noah's great. It sucks that they're lost, but Kansas City was almost a team of destiny there, which they were good enough to be a team of destiny. The Dodgers, I still don't understand back in the Socia year. Yeah. They weren't good enough to have destiny, but
yeah.
I mean, Kansas City got there. Things didn't break the Mets' way for sure, but it would have been real nice to win it. It was painful to lose it, but if we're going levels of pain, that 07 collapse is just caused me more agita.
Yeah, again, with an added factor of what came before, what came after. What came before the 15 team was years of failure, and there was the expectation, and they did make the playoffs in 16. I think as a wild card again. Um, and that 15 season was magical when they were middling along in mid-July, and then they made the great trade for Cespedes, the failed trade when they were going to trade Wilmer Flores, and then they sweep the Nationals and start just dominating baseball for the next month and a half. That was great fun, and then they start wrecking the Cubs and the Dodgers in the playoffs. That was a great ride. So it was hard to. I agree with you. It's hard to think of that as a painful season, even though it ended in pain. I think.
Yeah, there was a lot of unexpected good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So on the other side of the bracket,
season.
so those are the two going through on the Mets side of the bracket, if you will.
Okay, and when we get it down to the final four, we'll take a pain break, and I'll give you your trivia for this show. And
right.
We do have an email set up. If anybody tries the trivia, I don't know what we got for prizes, but we'll think of something. But our new email to use is Flickboz, all one word, FLICKBOZ @gmail.com. I'll give that again at the end. And hopefully, if my daughter's able to do it, we'll have a YouTube page, and I'll put this email on there as well. So
right.
People want to play along with the trivia. We used to give out nice prizes. We had shirts and hats. We even gave away some football jerseys. So
yeah, I think there was an autographed Sean Alexander jersey
yes,
at one point, right?
Sean Alexander, yes, of all things. The guy who won, we didn't get the autograph. He did, because the guy who won it went to school with Sean Alexander, the Seahawks running back at the time. Yeah. All right, let's do the other side.
So the other side on the single game brackets, you have the no tarp game, the infamous 1982 AFC Championship game. The Jets go into Miami. The Jets are upset from the start because the Dolphins failed to, or decided not to, put a tarp on the field. Richard Todd goes 15 for 37 that day for 103 yards and 5 INTs. I think the Jets finished with less than 140 total yards from scrimmage. 3 of the interceptions were to the immortal A.J. Dewey,
who was a lineman
in many years since. I think he was a linebacker, according to what I saw today. Refreshing my memory on this from nearly 40 years ago, which is twice as long as since our last show. Also a name I haven't said in many years, similar to Joel Pinheiro. There was a key sequence late in the game with the leading to the Dolphins' first score when they were driving down. And Tony Nathan appeared to lose a fumble, was ruled down by contact, and then David Woodley passed to Duriel Harris on a 3rd and 3 for 13 yards.
This was pre-Marino.
Pre-Marino. It's 1982. Marino was drafted after the 83 season, right?
We had enough painful moments against Marino, but this was that were featured in the brackets, no less.
The infamous spike play was which I still find it amazing that it lost in this bracket. But the Jets safety Dorrell Ray drew a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on that play, and then led to an easy walk-in touchdown. And then with 2 minutes into the fourth, Dewey got his 3rd interception and ran it back 35 yards for the score, and that was the last score of the game. So that is your first winner. That had, by the way, beaten that Game 7 loss between the Devils and the Rangers. The Devils' first real foray. The next year they went on to win the.
And this is a 1 seed? This is a worthy number 1 seed if it is.
Dewey was the number 2 seed. The Devils' Rangers was number 1.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Dewey was the 4 seed. I take that back.
That was bad seeding.
The team they're playing was the Jets' double OT loss to the Browns in '86. And I didn't remember this, but Pat Ryan was the quarterback. I guess O'Brien, speaking of the infamous '83 draft, was injured late in the season, and Pat
Yes.
Ryan started the last couple of games and started this game, and the Jets score with Freeman McNeil a 25-yard score to go up 20 to 10 in the fourth quarter.
20-10. That's what I remember about this game. They There are a couple things I remember which may or may not be accurate,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I don't remember them. I might remember them totally wrong. But on the TV, the announcer was Don Criqui, who I really liked as a football announcer, and he was on NBC. And on radio was almost my same last name. The Jets announcer was Marty Glickman,
Oh yeah.
and as Freeman McNeil scored that touchdown to put the Jets up 10, he said something like, "Oh, and the Jets are going to the AFC Championship." They turned out to be wrong, but everyone would have thought that this was a Marty Schottenheimer Cleveland team, and that I guess it was that County Stadium that was a multi-use stadium, and it was muddy and rainy, and the Browns had that straight-on kicker, Mark Mosley, and he missed one in the first half or early in the second half. So it was a defensive game because of mediocre quarterbacking, like you mentioned, and the Browns, I think, had this was before Kozar. They had
Kozar was
I believe. Kozar was that
his rookie year. He was
okay. All right. And see, there's my memory already. But Cleveland was doing nothing on offense, and they got to the half 10-10. I think the Jets had a field goal right before the half, and then a field goal right after the half, so that get the ball, worked out for them, and then the second half was a long half with nothing going on. There must have been turnovers, punts, but neither team could do anything on offense. Somewhere along the line, Mosley missed one, but I think of that Freeman McNeil touchdown to make it 20-10. Oh, there was like 3 minutes left, but there wasn't. I know there was more than that, but it's almost like there couldn't have been because that second half was so darn long. And they made it 20-10, and they were dominating on defense. This was the sack exchange defense, and stupid Gastineau was dancing around. He got a penalty at some point. I think they roughed the quarterback at some point. And really, this was in between Walt Michaels and the Kotite era and the Kozlov era. I believe this was the Joe Walton team.
It was correct.
And he was coaching, and they just went into such a prevent and such a shell, and Cleveland scored, and they may have tried an onside kick and not gotten it, or kicked away and the Jets did nothing. But if I remember correctly, Cleveland almost scored a second touchdown in regulation to win.
Yep. They had a 22-yard field goal at the end of the game to tie it.
They got down inside the 10, and maybe they were out of timeouts or botched the clock. And I think they even kicked the field goal when they could have run a play.
What? Schottenheimer blew the clock? That's crazy.
Well, and he was such a great regular season coach and such a bad playoff coach. But he was just good enough to beat the Jets. And they decided to kick the field goal and send it into overtime. And the overtime took forever. And again, nothing was good. The overtime was just like the rest of the third quarter. There was nothing happening. Neither team even had field goal attempts. It was rare to get past the 50. And finally, in the second overtime, it was just a matter of time. Cleveland finally put the Jets out of their misery. And this was one of those Cleveland teams, I think, that ultimately lost to Denver.
Same score next week, 23.
Was it the same score? Okay. And Denver could do anything when they went into Cleveland. They couldn't do anything when they got to Super Bowls then. But, Elway and Denver got them to the Super Bowl.
Yep. And that was Kevin Mack in that game, right? Wasn't he the guy that fumbled on at the goal line and against the
Yep.
Broncos. So he had the yeah. So
Oh, that was the first. Yeah, that was the first Denver. Okay.
that's the
Yeah.
that's the on the one side there. So those are the two matchups. There is the AJ Dewey Tarp
That is a tough
the double
matchup.
overtime game. You want the other side
That may
next,
be
or do you want to do that? Do you want to do that?
that may be the toughest two single games. I mean, there have been some AFC championship losses. Lost to Denver in the AFC championship when they were up 10
Yep.
nothing, but my expectations there were low. Lost to Pittsburgh in the AFC championship when I thought they had a real good shot. Lost to Indy in the AFC championship. But all these games were away, tough places. I mean, Cleveland was a tough place too, but gosh, they had that game. Miami, they kind of got screwed with the tarp thing, and somebody told me that going into playoffs, I think it was my dad who said, "Oh, Miami would have to beat them 3 times in 1 year, and that's rare." And at the time, given my age, I'm like, "All right, that sounds reasonable." I didn't do any research, didn't have the internet or anything, but oh yeah, it must be hard to beat a team 3 times, and you rarely play a team three
Yeah.
times, and if you're home, you're probably better than them, but they were both rough. I I remember watching that Cleveland game from start to finish and just suffering through the overtimes. And that Jet Miami game I was out of the house. I think it may have even been my sister's birthday party. She has a January birthday. It may have been around then, and I didn't see that whole AJ Dewey game, and I was probably a little young to understand it all and understand that getting to AFC championships is rare and winning them is, especially for the Jets, even more rare. I may surprise you here. I'm going to take that Cleveland game.
All right. Yeah. I don't remember the AJ Dewey game that well either. I think we were both 12 or 13 years old then. It's obviously a terrible game and one of those similar to the snowplow game where the home team just got with the Patriots and the Dolphins, I think, right? When they got the advantage
Yeah,
by
a rare time Shula got
yeah,
screwed, I
exactly.
think.
Uh, I just remember that Cleveland game. Yeah, that was a brutal loss. Uh,
Ugh.
so I actually agree with you on that one. I would have picked that one. Uh,
Now, you could look at the other way. That Miami team wasn't real good,
yeah, no,
and
no,
we had an opportunity to beat them and didn't. But would the Jets have beaten Denver the next week? Who knows? But as a moment, I'll take that Cleveland game.
yeah. Maybe you think about what might have happened if O'Brien had been healthy. I don't know.
I remember it better too, so I think I'll take
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So on the other side of the bracket, we alluded to it before. The years of pain. Mo Lewis knocks out Drew Bledsoe to start the Tom Brady era. And on the other side, and they're going up against Belichick resigning as HC of the NYJ.
You had to use those damn initials.
In the, I think that's exactly what he wrote on the blackboard.
Of course, of course. I am no longer.
So,
I am no longer.
A little background, if for the folks scoring at home, or even if you're by yourself, I'll use the old Keith Olbermann line. Mo Lewis, it's the second game of the 2001 season. The first game back after 9/11. The Patriots had lost the first game of the season. They went on to lose that Jets game, I think 10-3, to go to 0-2 on the season. Brady comes in. They go 11-3 over the next 14 games. Bledsoe was nearly killed apparently by that play. He had some internal injuries. He was bleeding into his chest. And they found out later he actually came out of the game. I was just researching this. He came out of the game because of a concussion. They didn't realize about his internal injuries. So they had him in the hospital in the ambulance, and he blacked out. And they're like, "Okay, this is not good." So just a little bit of color there. When he got healthy later in the season, he's like, "Oh, great, the guys are winning." I was just watching. The guys are winning. I'm ready to come back in. And Belichick's like, "No, we're good."
Didn't he help them in one playoff game?
I didn't. You're right. I seem to remember that. I don't recall the context of it, but I do believe he came off the bench or something like that briefly. And then that was the team that beat the Greatest Show on Turf,
Yeah.
Rams, in the Super Bowl when
Right. Right.
what's his name? The linebacker was. Oh no, that was I was thinking of when the Rams, the Titans game. Sorry, I get my games.
No, the Kurt Warner Rams.
Yep.
Yeah.
When,
The Isaac Cruz.
I was thinking of the game that the Titans fell short on that last play of the game.
Oh yeah. When yeah, he dove for the end zone, missed it
Yeah,
by
by a yard or two.
yeah,
Yeah,
by a touch. Yeah, I don't remember that line, but I remember the play, and yeah, I don't
but you
remember.
wonder. I mean, Bledsoe was a great quarterback. He was with the number one overall pick before.
He was erratic, but he scared me. He would have great
Yeah,
games, but he would give you a chance for an interception, and he'd have lousy games. And who knew what Brady would be? I certainly didn't think he'd
sure.
be anything like
No,
that.
at the time it was
So
definitely an innocuous thing, right? You go,
yeah, I don't like knocking people out or anything like
yep.
that, but I wasn't fearful of this Tom
No, I was
Brady.
a
I
round pick.
remembered him a little bit about Michigan, but I knew he alternated playing at Michigan.
Yeah,
So who would have thought he'd turn out to be what he is? Now, if you look at it that way, oh, if we don't knock him out, it never happens. That's one of those uh,
it might have been.
kind of moments where, oh, if you turn left instead of right,
You look at
and
how
that's
49
weird. It's weird to rate that.
you look at how
Yeah.
the 49ers ended up with Jimmy Garoppolo. That was a direct
Yeah.
result of the Deflategate. Because Garoppolo,
Right.
the Brady had this sit there for
Sit
games,
out.
and everybody saw how good Garoppolo was, and suddenly, they can't just stow him on the bench for a couple years and sign him to an innocuous, backup quarterback uh, thing. It would have just been a note on the waiver wire, and nobody would have blinked. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, this whole thing is a what if moment, but
the other side,
yeah, what's that going? Oh,
this was
the
when Parcells came,
Belichick.
right? Parcells was
Yeah.
retiring again.
Now that's the part of this that really makes me
Yep.
upset. Parcells had some health issues, had to step down. I don't blame a guy for doing that if he's got health issues and he's got his uh, predecessor lined up. Is that the right word? I think so. He's
Yes.
got the person who's going to take over lined up, and it's a great defensive coach. He had a head coaching shot at Cleveland. It didn't work out, but not all his fault. Cleveland wasn't going to have a team anymore. And um, so at the time, I'm like, okay, Parcells has this figured out. I'd rather Parcells stay, but things happen.
Yep.
When Belichick says he's not going to be the coach, okay, well, to me, then Parcells almost has a responsibility to jump back in, especially if in a couple years he's going to be coaching the
Yeah.
Cowboys.
That's the part, right?
That's the part that really gets me. If Parcells is out of football, I don't expect him to step back in. But the Jets had a pretty good team, and suddenly Al Groh's coaching it. And, this was the team that was going to have Testaverde back, I believe. And, you're leaving it with a guy who's never coached, been a head coach in pro football, and who turned out to be fairly bad at it. He was a decent college football coach, never a great one. So that part of this, I put on Parcells. Hey, you got to know what's going on. Does Belichick have a right to do what he did? I guess he has a right, and the Jets got a lot of picks and a lot of money. But we look at this Belichick goes on to coach a team in the division to 9 Super Bowl appearances.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
oof, they're both kind of what if moments. But Belichick quitting, you kind of got the what if. What if that happens? Let's live it out. You kind of got that. That was the strange one. Knocking out Bledsoe, yes, that leading to Brady, but I think ultimately Brady was good enough and had enough talent. You were going to see Brady eventually.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the Belichick resigns
Yeah. Yeah.
as more painful.
I had to agree with you there, especially again looking at what happened next. As you said, Parcells coming back to coach again, and Belichick going on to coach what became arch rivals over the next 20 years. Um, and of course they ended up coaching together, coaching Brady, um, and yeah, just bad karma all the way around there, just ugly. So the final four, is Socha, the Socha home run in '88 against the
Yep.
collapse in '07,
That's a good
and
matchup.
the double OT loss Jets Browns in '86,
Yeah.
and the Belichick resigning.
They're a worthy Final
All
Four.
right, we'll be back.
You want to take a moment for
Trivia
your
time.
trivia?
Trivia time.
Trivia time.
Back for the first time.
And Dave will vouch. I guess I'll vouch. He has not heard these questions before.
Certainly not from Phil. If I have,
He does not know these. He's going to help anyone trying to get all six
yes.
correct. And if you're trying, you'll send an email to Flickboz, all one word, at gmail.com. And you got to go 6 for 6. Dave's going to do his best to help you out. And big advantage now. I guess we had the internet then, but big advantage. It's a lot better and easier. So on a couple of these, I had to dig pretty deep to get you some tough questions. But
I'm reminded. I
you,
got a flashback to WKRP and their 5 songs.
yes, the music mix. Bah, boop, bah.
No, you're way off.
You're way off. He had 5 out of 6. What? I think the guy who came to claim the prize was one of the ghosts in the movie Ghost. So
I did not.
All right, here we
A
go.
little extra.
All right, number one, and I'll write down your answers, so I'll have them for posterity. Okay. Who we talked a little bit about the 9/11 home run? Who was on base when Piazza hit the post 9/11 home run? And I'll oddly accept two different answers, even though only one guy was on base. I'll accept two different answers. Here's why: a player walked, and then he was pinch run for. I'll accept the player that walked or the pinch run.
I already blurted out my answer, but I don't know if you heard me. I'm going to go with Timo Perez.
Timo Perez. Timo Perez. Got it. Not that you got it right, but I got it written down. I won't reveal whether you are right or wrong. But if somebody wants to go 6 for 6, you may not want to use all of Dave's answers. We'll go on to number 2. One moment I thought would probably be in the final 4, didn't even make the final 8, was the Devils losing the series to the Rangers in '94. Ultimately, who did the Rangers go on to beat in the Stanley Cup?
I believe that was the Vancouver Canucks.
I like the pronunciation there. All right, number 3. In the Jets-Bills playoff game in '81, another moment that I thought may advance pretty far in this bracket. Jets-Bills playoff in '81, I believe a 31-27 Jet loss. Came from way back, and Richard Todd threw an interception down by the Bills' goal line. Who was the Bills' starting quarterback?
That was Joe Ferguson.
Joe Ferguson. All right. We move on to number 4. Another tough loss for the Jets. Christmas Eve in 2011. A Giants wide receiver had 164 yards receiving against the Jets that night. Who was that Giant wide receiver? May not have been at night. May have been during the day. But what Giant wide receiver had 164 yards receiving against the Jets on Christmas Eve in 2011?
I got to go with Victor Cruz.
Victor Cruz.
I know he had, I don't know what game it was, but I remember he had that 99-yard touchdown pass reception. It was ridiculous.
That would help you get to 164 pretty quickly. If you did that. If you're accurate. As we've seen, our memories are not what they used to be. All right. I want you to name, number 5, name any of the 3 players traded for Tom Seaver by the Reds in 1977?
Can I get three? I think I may be able to get all of them. You had Doug Flynn. You had Pat Zachary. And I'm not going to come up with the third one. I think I got two of them, though.
Well, there were 4 players in the trade.
Oh, there were 4. All right.
There were 4. And I want you to name 3.
I have to name a third player.
You do.
Foley. Tim Foley.
Well, Tim Foley. Okay. So you've gone with Pat Zachary, Doug Flynn, and Tim Foley.
Yes, sir.
Those are 3 names.
They are, and I think there are 3 Mets from that era.
And they are not in my kitchen at this moment. All right. More Jet lore and pain. Ken O'Brien was picked 24th in the 1983 draft. Who did the Cowboys pick 23rd? I got to give you some sort of hints. The Cowboys picked a defensive lineman.
A defensive lineman in 1983.
Yes. I will say this. He had a long career. I wouldn't say he's an all-time great, but he was around for a long time. Ended up playing with one other team, I believe, but known as a Cowboy.
Yeah, the first name that came to mind was Charles Haley, but I think he started with the Niners and ended up with the Cowboys.
I believe you're right on that.
I'm going to not say Charles Haley.
That's a good name not to say.
The other guys I'm thinking of were all from before that, like Too Tall Jones and those guys. They were on the 70s Cowboys. 83 Cowboys. I don't have a really good guess on that. I don't even have a bad guess. I'm just going to say Bruce Smith.
Bruce Smith, you're leaving the listeners on their own on that one, I believe. But Bruce Smith is your official guess.
Official guess, drafted by the San Antonio Slingers.
The person that was drafted by the Cowboys was also drafted by another league, but he decided the Cowboys were the better way to go.
Okay.
That's not much of a hint at all, as a lot of people were being drafted by the USFL at that time.
Yes, by President Trump.
Well, I don't believe the Generals was the team, but that's your trivia. That was 6 trivia questions.
That is 6, and
no denying that was 6 questions.
At least 2 of them.
You did get at least 2. All right. Going back. Oh boy.
All right. You want to do the?
I've had some water. I'm okay. I've revived. I'll get there.
I feel like we need the theme music back.
Wait. Do I still have it?
So going to the Mets side. Let's go to the Mets side first, and then do the Jets. Scioscia in '88, game 4 versus the 07 collapse. Scioscia, and that, I think if you want to put this in context, there it is. If you want to put this in context, that was sort of the beginning of the end. You had 89 and 90, and then you started having Gooden's arm trouble, and then you started to find out they had drug troubles, and then they let Davey Johnson go or fired him after 6 straight seasons with 90 plus wins. And then the Bud Harrelson era, and then the worst team that money can buy. So that was like, unbeknownst to us at the time, this was the Mets' last chance at a World Series. Since then, they still have not won a World Series since that moment.
That is why I'm going to have it advance.
There you go. So now, of course, the 07 class. I would just say, and I think you could argue both ways. To me, the argument against it advancing is that it's game 4. And they had plenty of time to make up for it, as you alluded to earlier. the argument in '07 is it was off the '06. '08 they collapse again, which was even although a smaller collapse. I think they were up 3 games with a similar amount of games to play, but collapse again, and then go into a tailspin in the post Bernie Madoff era, um, and you end up with the 6 or 7 consecutive years of
Yeah, and that's why doing this at times is tough. You're comparing a basketball event to a hockey event to a football event, and here you got the '07 collapse. I don't know if there's a specific moment other than Glavin's start,
yeah.
and yes, the Mets still could have had this social moment and won the series, but I'm going to take the shorter series over the huge
All right.
collapse. Just the the series makes me more upset and more painful because they're right there in the playoffs at the World Series. The '07 collapse, it's a missed opportunity and it's a numbers thing, but they could have lost the next series. So I think it was more a definitive we're the better team and we lost. I'll go with the social moment off Gooden. Plus, he got a couple well-known players
Yeah.
there. I won't say Scioscia's iconic as a player, but then he went on to be a pretty darn good manager too. And Doc never completely fulfilled all the things we had in mind for him as a great Met. He went on to be a darn good Yankee, and of course, he was a darn good Met, but
Yeah.
not a not an all timer, and he could have been, probably should have been.
That was actually one of my favorite additions to your bracket of pain and the years of pain was that he and Strawberry wasting their Hall of Fame talent between the drugs and the injuries. Um, and of course, you look back at Gooden's career, and he comes up as as an 18-year-old in A ball. He walked 100 men in the season, and they brought him up as a 19-year-old rookie the next year. In like 150 innings, he walked 100 men, and he struck out like 250. And they're like, oh, yeah, bring him up. And of course, he goes on to be rookie of the year and win 17 games. And then he wins Cy Young the next year, all as a 21-year-old. And you think this guy's going to be one of the best ever. And he just never, he never fulfilled that talent, fulfilled the promise. So I,
Yeah,
I kind of would have gone actually the other way. Maybe it's more of the recency factor. That's the first time today I think I would disagree with you. Really, I would have picked the '07 just because you sort of get this enduring. The '86 team that was still the same basic team in '88. You had that recent memory of the World Series win and the expectation they would be back there. They never did get back there, but the '07 team, they're still waiting, and that became like at that time the Mets again became a punchline, right? Like same old Mets, they can't win the big
same
one,
old
blah blah
man.
blah. So that's the first time I'll disagree with you today. Um,
Okay, fair enough. And you asked me this 10 times, I probably come up 5-5. They're
close,
both,
definitely.
yes, they're both close.
And on the other side, it's the double overtime loss to the Browns and Belichick resigning. Uh, Somewhat strangely, Belichick obviously had recently been
Cleveland.
the coach in between those 2 games of the Browns, uh, but unrelated to that, just coincidental.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the game over the moment, over the long term effects. And I think I made it pretty clear that Belichick resigning upset me, and the way it was done upset me. But I'm just as mad at Parcells as I am at Belichick. And what Belichick then went on to do great things with the Patriots, but that's not his fault. He should coach for them as damn hard as he can. I'm looking at this at the game, and I'll take that Cleveland game.
And not for nothing, part of to me part of the reason that Belichick may have made that decision. I don't know how much he ever talked about it. Is that the Jets? One of the ongoing things with the Jets is their ownership, and and they just never seem to have the right people together, whether it's the coach, the GM, the quarterback, the defense, there's always something just a little bit missing. And that may have been part of his decision making process. He looked across at what
Absolutely, absolutely,
the
it was.
Patriots there had, and they had Bledsoe, and they had a very good team. They had just been, a Super Bowl team a few years ago, losing to the Packers back, was it '96 or '97? Um, and they definitely were a great team, and they had a good situation there. And as it turned out, Robert Kraft ended up being a very good owner. You have to say. Um, so I'm not sure which side of the coin I'm actually talking to there, but part of that, part of that,
No, you're taking some of the blame off Belichick. Whether that causes me less pain or not, I don't know.
yeah, and certainly I think that's one of the things that both the Mets and the Jets have had in common is just similar to. It's hard to say. It's not like they don't want to win. The Wilpons and the Johnsons, and you compare that to Snyder down in Washington. These guys want to win. They just don't seem to know the right decisions, and it drives you crazy. Like, how can you make?
No, and they tend to surround themselves with people who aren't going to say no to them.
And yet
And
I agree with that, but they try to make the right decisions. Like the Mets try to hire when they hired shoot the guy they hired away to be their GM from Oakland that did the rebuilding process, Sandy Alderson.
yeah,
That was the right hire. I mean, people hated what he did and they hated the years of losing, but that had to be done. They had so much fat they had to trim from the Omar Minaya years, and it just had to be done. So, I think the Wilpons try to do the right thing. I think the Johnsons try to do the right thing. It just never seems to end up working out, and it's hard to put an exact reason why a lot of times. But maybe,
you're right.
maybe
And
a different owner talks Belichick into staying. I don't know.
yeah, and someone's willing to own the team, and I you could see no owner names advance to my too far in my
Yeah,
brackets. Um,
the
I
Wilpons,
thank them for owning the team. And yeah, they make money on it, but
well, the Wilpons. If I had made it the Wilpon Bernie Madoff thing, would that have made a difference? It,
probably
going to
not.
that went up that ended up losing to the Ken Bryan pick over the Dan Marino pick
Probably not.
in round one.
They had somebody making the money who they thought was supposed to be making the money. I it
Yeah,
yes, people got screwed. I'm not sure in that moment what the Wilpons did wrong, other than associating with a guy that tons of people associated with and thought was one of the best to be associated with.
yeah.
So in that moment, I don't look at that. People that happen to make money with Madoff, if they truly didn't know what was happening and just made their money and took it out at the right time, I don't blame them for it. And maybe there should be some blame there, but
And don't get me wrong,
I don't.
I have been extremely frustrated with the Mets ownership in particular. I'm sure you've been equally frustrated with the Jets ownership as well. We're not trying to give anybody a pass on
No.
on that score, except to say it's not that they don't try to win. It's just that sometimes they seem to put other things. I will say this: they seem to put making money ahead of winning at times, which is very frustrating. And
Yes.
they say the right things. They say, "Oh, you have to spend money to make money," and they say the right, and then they go ahead and they dump salary and
Right.
when they should be try and double down and just get that last piece to the puzzle. So we are down to this. It is
Drum roll,
Osha
please.
game tying home run off Gooden in '88. It ended up being with McDowell losing in 12, I believe it was, and the double overtime loss to the Browns in '86, missing out on the chance to lose to Elway or to
Yes. Look, they would have broke my heart further into the playoffs. Um, Both worthy finalists. And I never like to say which team do I like more or frustrates me more, the Jets or the Mets. It's like having two kids. Which do you love better and which do you love more? Um, I am going to, and I think just because even my memory's a little sharper on it, and even if I factor in as a tiebreaker, well, at least in my lifetime, I'm 50 and never been even alive for a Jet Super Bowl appearance, let alone win. The Mets did give me something in
Yeah,
'86 and have given me other World Series appearances.
yeah, quite a few.
I'm going to take the Jets Cleveland game as my most painful.
I can't fault that logic. I can't fault that logic. Uh,
Just the fact that I had any logic.
that is surprising nonetheless. But um, yeah, no, I think they're two snake bit franchises, um, and certainly the Mets have been close. Sometimes that's the argument for taking it. You go back to the comparison of the Red Sox and the Cubs over the years. The Cubs were never close, and people say, oh, the Cubs, they're such a heartbreaking franchise. The Cubs are just lost for decades at a time. I'm exaggerating slightly, but the Cubs made the
Yeah,
playoffs what,
and
once, twice between 1945 and 2000 or something. Like uh,
they were just lovable losers. They weren't painful.
exactly, the Red Sox lost
Yes,
heartbreaking ways, and
yes, more painful
multiple
stuff.
times. The Pedro walk-off home run in '03, and the collapse against the Indians in '99, and of course the '86 series, and the Carlton Fisk was a '75 series. Boy, I mean, just every single time, and they just never got there. And keep going back to the Ted Williams era, and between what 1930 something and 1960 something, was 62 or 63 when he retired. Uh, and then he went right into the guy who took over for him in left field was Yastrzemski, and he never won either. And then between the two of them, you had two Hall of Fame left fielders that played for 45 years between them, and they never won a World Series. And that
No
was
ring.
clearly to me more painful. And that way, getting it back to the subject at hand, you could argue that the Mets getting closer more times is more painful. Uh, but having that one win, I guess.
At least having that one to hang your hat
Yep.
on. Hey, we should. I know we're going to do some more joyful events next time. We're over an hour. We should probably wrap it up. But I can't believe we did this, and I can't believe how fun it is. And we could we could talk for hours, I'm sure. For those who are trying the trivia, that's flickboz at gmail.com. Just send us your trivia answers, and we'll see if you go 6 for 6. And we'll be back next time, hopefully in about a week, with another recording. And Dave, it was a ton of fun.
Absolutely, Flick. Great talking with you as always, and great talking sports in this era of no
I
sports.
that's the important thing. Be well, be safe, and we will do it again soon.